All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to this session. It's xLights and how to use the API. And we're joined by Bill Jenkins. Bill, go ahead.
Well, hopefully everybody's still awake. It's been a long day and very good classes going on. Don't forget to check out the vendor room, that type of thing. Let's see. As well as we'll get started here. I'm Bill Jenkins, and this is my 5th year doing xLights. Done that from the beginning. I was 40 years in the IT industry as a programmer as well as a network engineer. So both wireless and all kinds of things. But we'll get started here, which you didn't come to hear about me. You came to hear about the xLights REST API. And these are some of the application program interfaces you can use to access the xLights REST API. And you can use curl. You can use what Keith Wesley wrote, the xLDO application. There's also a built-in capability within xLights to use Lua scripts. And I hope to actually demonstrate to you today some Python scripts that I've written myself to actually use the REST API. And my whole goal today is to assist you in understanding how you might be able to use these APIs to automate tasks in xLights for yourself that don't exist in the current version of software. Some of these might be repetitive in regards to what I demonstrate because there's already something built in to do it. I just did it for the enjoyment, if you will. So there's my introduction. I guess something special. I at one time put roller skates on a penguin and was rescued by dolphins, but okay. So, and hopefully the next one doesn't blow your ears out. But, this is to get us started doing the REST API in xLights. So what is a REST API? Well, it does not mean that this is what you do while waiting on your sequence to render. And for those that might not be able to read the identification here, there is no, that isn't George Nash there, but it may look like him a little bit. But what is a REST API? And all it is, it's just an interface, usually using something like HTTP, to request information and get a response in a particular type of format, okay? Now, how can you do that and utilize the xLights REST API? Well, the first thing you have to do is inside of xLights, you need to go into File, Preferences, Output, and you need to enable xFade xschedule, which is disabled by default. And you need to assign it to port A or port B. Now, the reason why you need to do that is this is how you can talk to the API and make requests and get responses. So this is the first thing you need to do, okay? Now, you can use curl, not these types of curls, okay? You need to use the client for URL that is actually in Windows, it's on a Mac, it's definitely in any type of Linux type setup, but you can use curl to do API requests and get responses. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples here. This is a curl to get the version of xLights, actually run from a Windows prompt. This is where you can get the current show folder. The next one's a little more complicated because you're actually telling it, I want you to upload a sequence to this IP address, which would be a controller that allows you to upload sequences to it. So you can do this with curl, but obviously you can see this is rather tedious, if you will, okay? So this is why Keith Wesley wrote the xLDO application. And it's, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's available on the Mac or in a Linux version. That's something only Keith could answer. I do know it's within Windows. And it's located actually in the program files for xLights, and it's called xLdo. The logo there is not something anybody else came up with. I just thought it was appropriate that it was an easy button for xLights, if you will. There are example commands, okay, in the xLdo command documentation, okay? And you can see how you can use xLdo to do this. In GitHub, there's actual sample scripts available that you can find that Keith has written. And there's also a video that Keith did, which I'll be glad to give you reference to there. There's a link on it on this particular page that allows you to automate xLights using xLdo and the REST API. So without further ado, we'll kind of give you some examples. And I have quite a few of them of the xLdo app, but it has a help screen that you can run. And this is all from a terminal or window, command line type application. And this is the parameters you can pass it. And there's the curl doing a get version, for instance. This is getting a show folder. This is changing the show folder. And one of the things I ran into is currently it does not seem to care, at least on the Windows version for sure, that the show folder is not case sensitive. And the problem I ran into with that is that when you do a check sequence on it, it will fail because it'll tell you every image and shape, etc., is not in the show folder. So I had one where I was just running tests, and it's like, how all of a sudden I'm getting 420 errors on this? And it's because it was all in lowercase, like it is in this example here. So my Python scripts actually require the case to match the way it's entered on the system, even though Windows doesn't care. All right, so this is how you can actually open a sequence in using the xLdo. You can tell it to render a sequence once it's opened. You can save a sequence. You can clean up file locations. Now, if you don't know what this is, I believe it was Keith that wrote the application. It attempts to clean up file locations within a sequence that it can still find the images, the references in the sequence file. It can still find them somewhere on your system, and then it will move those into the show folder, into an image directory or a video directory or shaders. It does not seem to care about faces as far as I could figure out. I actually have a sequence that I intentionally set up incorrectly, where the best practice is to put everything inside your show folder. Okay. You can close a sequence. You can run a check sequence. Okay. And then it'll tell you to put it out into a temp text file. You can save your layout, which consists of your controller tab and the layout. The reason, one of the main reasons this particular function is here is because when you do a check file locations, it may actually have to change the layout slightly. So you want to save the file as well as save your layout and controller tab if you do something like that. You can actually shut down xLights. And xLdo actually even lets you start xLights if it's not started. And this is the layout for like an upload sequence. So as you can see, it's a little cryptic, okay? But it is possible to do this, okay, with xLdo. And you can upload a controller configuration. And you can upload an FPP configuration. So that's just briefly what XL can do for you. Okay. Now there's also Lua scripts. Okay. And Lua is just another programming language, except it can be very brief. And the Lua scripts that you get when you download xLights are contained in Windows where you installed xLights, which would normally be your C drive program files and then xLights and scripts. But obviously it's possible to install xLights somewhere else, depending on what you've done. But since it's in the normal program files directory, you're going to need administrative privileges to place a new script in this folder. You can't do that without administrative privileges. And in xLights, you just pick tools and run scripts, and it brings up the scripts that are available in Lua. Now, I have out on my GitHub a couple of additional Lua scripts. One's repetitive, the bulk controller upload tool. It was just done for the purposes of, oh, what can I do in Lua? But there is another one that actually will let you select and do the fix up on the file locations for all of those. And my understanding is Scott Hansen was going to get that added into xLights so it would come down. It may be in 2013's version. I don't know yet. I'm still on 2011. So, but I have those two scripts that I wrote out in my GitHub. And this is an example of that Lua script. And that's all the coding it took to make that happen. It prompts you for the sequences based on which ones it selects. It then goes through and it runs the open sequence, the cleanup file locations, the save sequence, and the close sequence, and then it saves the layout after it's updated all the sequences. So, but that's all it took to do that. This maybe took 5 or 10 minutes to write. It doesn't take a whole lot to do. So this is what I've spent most of my time on when I messed around with the xLights REST API. And I'm using Python to do that. And my samples can be found out on GitHub at that link there. And there is a README MD there that gives you quite a bit of information about each of these scripts. So these are the sequences I put out there. Now, only one of these does not use the REST API at all, and that's the check sequence media. I wrote something that would just actually run down through all the sequences in a show directory and try to tell you if it was actually in the show folder or not. So, and that's for almost anything. The only thing it doesn't currently do is faces, because I was going to have to merge in another script I had, which I have not posted up on GitHub yet, so which was strictly for faces. But the idea here is so that everything is inside your show folder, so things work properly throughout the entire xLights program. So check sequences actually kind of mimics the check sequence, except you can do it on multiples. It will open it for you, and you can actually have it open Notepad and look at it. You can even tell it to make a copy in a folder within your show folder of the check sequences for further use. Cleanup file locations will do the same thing. It does not allow you to, how shall I say it? It just does all the sequences, I believe. Okay, right off the top of my head. The export models actually is using what the REST API, which is called export models CSV, but I called it exports models in my Python script because now it actually exports an Excel spreadsheet. This is something that's already built into xLights to be able to export the models spreadsheet. Export video previews would actually go down and export your videos out to the MP4 format so that you would be able to do this in a batch type process. Of course, you may want to go get a couple of cups of coffee or maybe go to bed if you're trying to do it on a very large show folder. Package sequences allows you to do the same thing. And then render all actually renders the sequence, opens it, renders it, saves it, and goes on to the next one, so on and so forth. Upload controller configurations is kind of like the bulk controller upload. The upload FPP configurations, which I will show. There's a couple of these now that actually bring up a GUI screen so you can pick what you want to do. And it took me a while to figure out how to put columns inside these widgets. My programming skills were on different types of systems. And then upload sequences allows you to upload sequences. The FPP configurations and upload sequences require some JSON files to run. And that's because I didn't have a way programmatically as to how they're producing some of this stuff that they bring up in FPP Connect or anything like that. So you kind of tell it, if I'm uploading the sequence, what type of, do you want the media uploaded, and what type of, do you want a version 2 standard or a version 2 xLights, the formats in there. And export controllers is something that I've been working on. And what this does is it takes the information that's in the network's XML as well as the get controllers REST API and puts this into a spreadsheet format. Now, the test environment I have actually, I don't know, it may have 25 or 26 control. I tried to pick a controller from each vendor. And what's interesting is there's information here that you don't see in the controllers page. It gives you things like, does it support LED panels? What protocols does it support in regards to the lights that are attached to it? What protocols on the serial ports? And this is under controller capacity in the get controllers REST API. So I guess what I'll do now is I'll try to demonstrate some of my Python scripts to give you an idea of what you can do. So I'll kind of close out the show here. I'll stop the share. Okay, so this is what's up in my GitHub, and this is the documentation on the different scripts and the parameters that you can use to run it. These are all Python scripts. Now, obviously, I haven't tested this on 5,000 systems or anything. So there's always a possibility that something may not work, okay? Just like in xLights or any other piece of software, you'll run into something that you didn't plan on. But these are the scripts. These are all up there. And what I can do now, okay, you can see that xLights has started. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop xLights. And it's asking me to save models and preset images. Okay. All right. So we've done that. I'll bring up a directory. Okay. So now, as you can see, I'm not getting very good at typing anymore. So I actually made a command file so I wouldn't have to put in the one parm. No, okay. So I'm going to export controllers. Now, what you won't see is xLights brings up its window on my other monitor, but eventually xLights will show up in there. So this will actually start xLights for you. Okay. And it's actually done already what it was going to do. So if we look in the folder where this show is located, oh, come on. All right. I'm having trouble. Yeah, okay. I can't grab a hold of the window to do this. Sorry about the well, what do you know? Okay. Hmm. It's from the REST API. I'm looking for the Excel spreadsheet, and I'm not seeing it.
In the wrong folder, maybe. Need to go up one or two.
Well, it should actually go in the directory where it's at. Let me see if it put it in the test. And I wouldn't think so, but oh, I'm sorry. I am looking in the wrong directory. Okay, I apologize. It puts it in where you run the Python script by default. Okay, and I haven't gotten around to changing that. Geez, I guess it has been a long day. So here's the spreadsheet it created. So it gives you the ID and the name, description, so on and so forth, as well as the REST API get controllers information for each one. And it creates a separate worksheet for each controller. For instance, here's the Falcon. And if you're wondering why everything's going down, when I started running into this started getting ridiculously long. So it was going on to a separate page. So this was a much easier solution. So when you print this, they're readable as to what's going on. So the green are the fields that are in the responses in the XML or that type of thing. But that's the capability you have using the REST API. Now, this doesn't currently exist. Now, this could be used by somebody I'm sorry, if you've got one of these shows and you've got 25 controllers, this would be a way to permanently, this is what it was at the beginning of the season. You could compare things and see what's different, that type of thing. But it has the Experience Lights, Genius, it has a dig quad, it has a xLight, it even has a null controller. Now there's a few fields in here I can't really tell you. I mean, some of them make perfect sense to me, but there's other ones that don't. For instance, this is a null controller here. And for instance, I don't think that stands for universal power supply, for instance, right here where it says UPS, okay? So someone would have to ask one of the developers, what are these fields used for, to get some information. And I am showing you the values exactly the way they are in the names that are in the XML or that the GET REST API uses. I started thinking about coming up with some way to give them more English-like names for some of them, but this way it'll correspond to what comes back out of. And if they add a field, it should list that field. It's not hard-coded looking at anything as to what fields are there, or these keys, if you will. Okay, so that's one. Okay, another one I'd like to demonstrate. Hopefully we get this right. And I'll have to bring this over because I haven't figured out how, but this is actually, I got this done today, where it's actually up, it's showing you the individual columns. And it's a little confusing having to put it inside a tree view, inside a window, the way the GUI application works. But as you can see, there's a scroll bar here. So if there's more than entries that are provided for, you can select them all, you can clear them all, you can select individual ones, multiples, and then you can do an upload. And I'll actually upload one here, and you can watch the text on the left as well do this particular request. And I'll just randomly pick one. I don't want to do them all. And it uploaded the FPP config to that particular controller, which was this one here. Now, this is one of the things I haven't had a chance to get with the FPP, and I don't know if it needs to be on both sides, but when you do the upload FPP config, it's requiring you to restart FPPD, and it doesn't do that automatically. So I will do that. And as you can see in the output, not the output process, the pixel overlay models are now all uploaded to this particular configuration. And that's based on that JSON file, which let me open that. And I'll bring that over to show. Okay. It's just a list of controllers and whether you want UDP models or map to be done. But if you picked them all, it would try to upload to them all. Now you may wonder, okay, one of those controllers I know is not online. Okay. So let's go back and run it again. And I'll bring this controller. I don't have it turned on right now. So I'm going to run an upload. And it couldn't find it. So But these are all using tools within xLights to do this. The Python script is just formatting the curl request, seeing what you selected, and then telling it to do that, and then helping log it out to output. So that's, let's see, which ones goes to it automatically. But upload sequences. And as you can see, Windows doesn't care. So these are some sequences that are out there. So I'm going to pick these here. Now, oh, I don't want those. Okay, let me clear them. Okay. So, and it took me a while to find out how you can clear these lists. As you can see currently, this is a list box inside the window. It is not columns. And that's something I want to change, but I haven't had an opportunity to do that on this one. So I'm going to do an upload now. And it's uploading those sequences as we speak to the individual ones. The 50.7 is my master, so it has a little bit different, but you can actually see the request that's being formatted and it goes up. And this also has a curl file, so it knows, you know, what format to use, you know, whether you want the media to be uploaded, etc. It's just a JSON, I should say a JSON file to do that per se. So what else can I show you? Is there any other interest in any of the other sequences if I bring back up, well, a list of them per se somehow that I could demonstrate what they do? I don't want to try to show you all of them. That would be like, you know, okay, you would definitely fall asleep. But the whole point of this is you can do some things and you can gather information out of xLights. You can also change things, and that's where I ran into. The only thing I do is you can tell it a different show folder. For instance, once this gets done, okay, because it's running through all the sequences, okay. It's doing sequence 4 right now. And then obviously larger, I'm not doing very large sequences. Those are only 30-second animations, those. So this does take a while, okay. But you do get a positive response when it's been uploaded down here in the one window. Okay. Let's see. So if you package sequences, now all of these have this. So you can actually get the parameters for the Python script right from it. Most of these are not required except for the xLights show folder. Okay. So xLights is currently shut down. So I'm going to tell it the show folder. So I'm going to make a mistake on purpose. And it tells me it does not match. And that's because when I made this, I spelled it this way for whatever reason. Teach me to do everything in lowercase. Okay. There's also a verbose. And then there's a close on this. So I'll do them all. And the verbose gives you a lot more information as to what's going on. It's actually a good way to debug the script. So it's opened xLights now, and it's brought up a window to select sequences to package. So I'm going to go in here. And why not? Okay, we'll select them all. We got time here. And what this will do is create the zip file from each sequence. Now, if you've seen some of the zips and you know if the file locations aren't correct, it'll put things in a lost folder saying, I can't find these. Okay, so because it's not located in the show folder, for instance, but it can still find it. So right now it's packaging all those sequences. Okay, this is probably one that blew up on me. Now that's the other thing. It may actually pause if you get a prompt. I believe there's ways you can turn it off and just say open it anyways. But I believe that's when xLights did some of the things that occasionally it does, because I get a little I get ahead of myself and I start clicking on it before it's really ready to respond. So. All right, see, and I made a bad response there. Okay. All right, so it packaged those sequences. And that's because I've got some sequences. Oh, by the way, I searched the subdirectories within the show folders because I don't know. Some people put their sequences, each one in its own separate directory. Okay, instead of the show folder, the main show folder part. So it actually searches the subdirectories. It will not use a directory that has the name backup in it, which is what xLights uses to store backups of your, when it starts, of your sequences and all the other settings. Okay, so that's there. And then we can go over to xLights show. That's the API. And here's all the compressed zip files. And some people use this methodology to back up their show folder from a prior year so that it's possible to then import that into the next year. Because of the, they're getting new props. I need those high density props, or I'm getting, moving lights. So, or something changes. You sell your house and go to a new house. So it's just a methodology that you can create backups of all your sequences. You can also use it and create some kind of script to do an automated backup tool, if you will, and then put it up in the cloud somewhere. Although some people are using the cloud to actually store their sequences itself. All right. So for instance, okay, let me run the other one. Clicking on the one as usual. Now, for those that don't know, you can pipe this out to a file and call it check sequence media.log or whatever you want to call it. And then you could look at that with Notepad or Notepad++ or whatever you want to. And depending on how long this listing would get. So I'm just going to let it scroll on by here. Now, there is another JSON file just for your information that's got the xLights information into it of what IP address to use, what port, and then there's a couple of the XML file names, etc. that's strictly so that could be changed if it needed to be without having to get into all the Python scripts and redo them. Okay. And if you'll notice, oh, this does not need the REST API. So this went through and checked all the media within the folder. And it tells me there's 2 images and 2 videos on this sequence. There's none on the animations, just normal effects. And that there's a video in sequence invalid and 3 images. Okay. So I'll have to check that because sequence invalid is probably invalid. So let's demonstrate what the cleanup file locations does. I think I've got a few more minutes here. And then I'll be glad to take questions from anybody in regards to what they could do to automate, or they may have better ideas than I do as to what you could automate with these tools. This is not all the APIs. There's a ton of them. I just haven't found a reason, you can create a sequence, so on and so forth. So and I believe it'll auto map in sequences. So you can actually set up a map and then it would just bring it in. Okay, maybe we can get the vendors to, but that doesn't always work because you may not have candy canes or that type of thing. So it's one of those, I can see where it would be difficult for them to produce something to do that for you. But okay, all right. Let's see. I'm going to bring up xLights here. And within the tool itself, as far as I know, yeah. So my check sequence may not, it may find it and go, that's okay. And it's not checking that it's in the show folder. Okay. So I'm just going to open invalid sequence, or sequence invalid. And then run a check sequence. Now, I guess I could have done this from my Python script to show off the rest of the API. But, so here's the check sequence. And those are all the controllers in there. And it's telling me, I've got all these warnings about these are not under the show directory. Okay. So what I'll do is Python. I can't remember. All right, now, well, okay. And I believe on some other operating systems, you could actually just tell it to execute the name of the Python script.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay, but I appreciate it.
So this brings up a thing, and we know that this one has an invalid. So I'm going to tell it to clean it up. Now, this is one of the things, the tool that you run in xLights gives you absolutely no response. You have no idea. Did it work? Did it succeed? It just comes back and you can use xLights again. But this is the response you get out of the REST API. And it says it cleaned them up. So what I'm going to do here is we'll open key invalid sequence again. And we'll run check sequence on it again. Okay, and those are now gone. But how did it fix them? Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back to xLights in my show folder for this demonstration, and you'll see images. What it did is it was able to find the images and it copied them over into a directory called images in the show folder. Same way with shaders. Okay. And then where's videos? Oh, it's the reverse one. There's the video per se. So it does fix it. Although when you import a sequence, it puts it under imported media now, I believe. It made a major change to that. And it does it for each sequence by name or whatever. So, but it does put it within the show folder so you can actually, oh, I know where it's at. It's not over on the H drive under images and I can't find it now. Or, oh, I don't need that anymore. And you blow it all away, like last year's folder. The problem is all the images are gone now. So the intent here is you can go through and you can fix these locations as long as images or videos or that are still on your system. Okay. So I guess we're coming up here on almost 10 minutes till 8. So I'll pop up slideshow again. Do we have any questions? Anybody out there?
Yep, we're here.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Well,
On the fly, are you able to just, can you show an example of like creating an effect where you'd like do a for loop 30 times, you flash something and then you change the for loop to 15 iterations? Like, you said you could create effects. I mean, you said you could program sequences using the API.
on the
So
fly? Yeah, I don't know. I have not really tested those APIs yet. Okay, but there are ways to put certain things in where now the thing is where is it going to place them, and that I'd have to look and see how you can do that. But yes, it is quite possible to be able to do some things like that. That's my understanding. You can definitely create a new sequence.
yeah, well, animations. Yeah, basically animations. That would be my single. I find that the single highest ROI application of this API.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is quite possible. See, I haven't, and that's where I'm, oh yeah, it has those possibilities where, hi, I can take a timing track and, oh, here, I'll just put them all in and it just does it for you. That
You'd
type of
probably
thing.
spend more time trying to write the code to do it than just to knock something out quick.
Well, I understand that.
No, I'm just
Once-
saying, so in general, it might sound easy, but it's not that easy. There's also the roll the dice option for every effect. So if you don't like something, click on roll the dice and it'll change it.
Well, I understand that as well.
I know,
as,
but you do, but the other 14 people in the room might not.
okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. I haven't thought about anything like that.
I mean, like I've written effects in Arduino using the the fast LED libraries, and I do it programmatically. And it, like, for example, a fire effect. There's a lot of randomness to the effect, and you're simply altering the controlled randomness and making animation out of it. That's like highly desirable.
Well, I understand that. The
Yep.
biggest issue there would be is each effect has different parameters. Yeah. And do you know how many effects there are? Yeah, okay.
That's life.
And they keep adding effects as well as, it could be very intensive just to get it to work with one effect, let alone a lot of effects. But these are the documentation that Keith has provided for the xLights APIs. See, right here, you can create a new sequence, okay? Let's see. You can turn the lights on, you can turn the lights off. So xLights could output. You can play a jukebox button. There's things for getting the type of controller, okay? You can
And this means
copy-
that this means I could run a QA check to see if like I have some undesired stacking of brightness. I could like do a quality check and say, oh, this effect
Yes.
is stacking brightness on the controller, which is stacking them on a layout.
quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, you can add an effect to a model. And I have not tried this, okay? You see all the parameters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and that would, and it probably goes, you can pick the color palette, the effects settings, okay? All right, but I have not tried this, okay? So I can't tell you how well it works, okay? But supposedly it's in there, okay? And this is the get controllers, which I demonstrated and what it responds back with, okay?
If you were an xLights dev and you're QAing all the different kinds of controllers, that would make a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, well, the get controllers provide some information. It gives you the capabilities of the controllers on how many pixel ports, how many serial ports. Does it support panels? Does it support a virtual matrix? Smart remote count, can it do only 3? Can it only do 6? What smart remote types it supports? What pixel protocols it supports, and what serial protocols it supports. And those are not in the XML networks file. They only come out of this particular interface. So I believe they have some tables that are, statically maintained within xLights that they include in to the compile to add a new controller or whatever in its capabilities. Where that's at, I don't know. Okay, I haven't been able to discover where it's at. But some of this actually took some trial and error to get some of these to actually work. But you can add an effect to a model. You can copy all effects from one model to another model. Okay. You can actually run one of the Lua scripts. Okay. So
Good.
you can get the effect settings for an effect on a model. You can set the effect settings for an effect on a model.
Was that the end of the file?
Yeah, sorry. But this is actually, if you have a Windows, it's in the xLights. These are the xldo commands. It's explaining what each one does, okay? Which is using the REST API. It's really, xldo is just doing all the processing of formatting the request and getting that and getting the response back. So you can do some automations with effects and things like that, except you would have to play because, I mean, how much you can change on an effect from the settings part. It looks like start time and end time, and I don't know what selected does. See, that the thing is that's getting the effects settings and setting the effects settings. So you'd have to compare what, there's a color button palette. There's a checkbox palette. You'd have to see what each one of these parameters are per se that he's coded for.
Like what about triangle wave brightness?
I mean, I don't see anything like that where it's brightness on an effect, or if you were doing it on effects itself. I mean, I am showing you the defaults that are in the XML for the networks, for instance, that it would upload to a controller that supports that, where it can set that on all the ports for the default brightness and gamma settings. But,
Yeah.
And that wasn't in the get controller REST API. So that's why I ended up going to the XML directly. And I'm sure there's a reason they haven't tried to add some of this to the get controller, because it looks like there's quite a few places that's used as a reference to get stuff to use, within the application itself. And they don't want to break everything just to add a new field to that particular response. So, yes. Now, the thing is, an enhancement wise, you start playing with some of these, you might be able to do some automation, but you might think, hey, I need to be, when I get an effect settings, I need to see the brightness and the, then you could set gamma.
Yeah, probably not gamma.
Hue,
Yeah.
getting the hue, that type of thing. Now, but I don't think I see anywhere, where you've got a value curve assigned to it. And what that value curve is, so there's a lot of things there that, whether, you could use it to do some of that, it's quite possible. Okay, but, I just noticed that the controller thing, hey, some of these guys that have either drive-throughs or these 100,000 light shows or whatever, and you find out, how many controllers do you have? Ooh, 25. It's like, well, how do you keep track of how they're set up, and how they have their workbook? Well, the models export helps you with that. I thought this would help them document the controllers themselves, that type of thing. That was the purpose of it. And it's not something that it currently exists in xLights. It'd be nice if it was there, because then you'd have a workbook for the controllers and the models. Oh, here's all the setup. Oh, this is what's not right. Okay. And upload from xLights to get my controller set up to match, that kind of thing. You might be able to spot something that, isn't set up the way you think it should be. So, okay. Any other questions?
Have you tried using PowerShell or just picked Python because you do that with work or something?
Well, used to. Networking was CLI, and Python. Well, actually, I was using Gawk at one point in time. I found a Windows executable for Gawk, and I was getting listings out of network devices and then using that to document how they were set up, as well as troubleshooting, etc. And when you start talking, well, before APs had their controllers, wireless access points, when you start talking hundreds in an enterprise environment, and you're trying to make sure it's all set up the same, and somebody hasn't fiddled with one or something, this is the only way you, or it's on a certain version of code, those kind of things. Those would be some of the things I use Python for. So that's why I use Python. It gets into, I'm getting too old to learn more languages. I mean, I've done 6502 assembler and 370 assembler, COBOL, RPG3. That's when I was programming, but I haven't done that much except for when I was doing the networking, which using it for an as-built documentation or just a troubleshooting something to see that everything is, or actually configuring a bunch of different switches in an automated fashion. So when we did the Browns network, those were all done with templates to here, do it, do it, do it. You just had to kind of hook it up, make sure it ran, and they were consistently the same. And one of the things I've always learned, you need to be consistent, not necessarily right.
Hey, we're at the top of the hour. I'm just gonna, you guys can continue on chatting, but I just wanted to do the wrap so we can stop the recording.
Okay. Well,
So
I'd like to thank you for all attending, especially for those that, you know, it's 8 o'clock now, or if you're overseas somewhere, it's a lot later, okay, or a lot earlier, you know, depending on which way you're going. But thank you very much. And don't forget the vendor room with the discount codes. And I'd like to thank you for your participation.